Have you rebooted? You're muted.
Jaswinder, did you actually leave or did you actually stay on?
I stayed on.
Interesting. Okay, so I see you. Do you see me?
Yeah.
Doug, I see you now.
Yeah. Very bright. Doug is very bright.
Oh, he's in a children's cartoon, though.
You're muted, Doug.
But we cannot hear you. You are on mute.
He's mute.
You didn't know I was a cartoon all along, did you?
Well, I figured it had to. Otherwise, the shape of the head couldn't be quite so smooth. It had to have been drawn.
Mm.
You know that line from Jessica Rabbit? I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
Yeah. Yay. Hello, Kayla.
Hey, I can see 5 people now.
We're working. We're cooking.
Okay.
Stacy's not.
And Stacy's still in the shower. Oh, here she comes.
Oh, there she is.
Yeah, that's a hat trick I learned like 6 sessions ago. When all else fails, just log out and log back in and you get a different Zoom server and everything works.
Yeah, that's the first time I've actually seen that with Zoom. I've never seen that before, but you have? Have you, Doug?
Yes. Yeah, well, a variety of glitches, like not being, no video or somebody, or no partial audio, and, you know, people glitching.
Well, not
really
surprising
badly.
since, you know, Zoom traffic has, you know, gone up 10x or whatever, you know, in the
Yeah,
last
it's like,
several weeks.
like 3 billion people in a month.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be nice to be a stock owner of Zoom, but
yeah. Well, there were plenty of congressmen and senators that seem to have scored on that one.
Don't get me started.
God bless our
Having a
government.
good morning. Don't get me sleeping upset now.
Well, we can deal with that. This is unblocking after all.
No, we can't. I'll be blocked when I get like that. Yeah. Political constipation.
Well,
It's so much BS, I can't get rid of it.
yeah. Yep. Well, don't talk to me. I'm in the middle of MAGA territory. We've got armed white Christian terrorists storming our state house in Michigan, threatening lawmakers, and I'm like, why are these people not under arrest and in jail?
Okay, let's vent a little bit. Why is it that when, you know, great masses of people go stupid, they have to design a new hat? You know, either a pointed white thing or it's a red round thing. Geez, why is that all they're capable of to get stupid?
Well, somebody has to get the merchandising action, right?
Sorry, that was not my best self.
So let me see, what time is it? Well, we're 19 after, and everybody's like functional. And so why don't we do a quick check-in round? Like, where is everybody at? How is everybody? Jazz, you want to start? Your top left corner for me.
I'm in the top right corner for me. Kayla was in that corner. Now we've all gone oblique across the screen. We've got Thais and Colin. Colin's audio is just logging in.
Welcome, Tees.
I don't really have much of a check-in. I've been out, had a nice walk, did some grocery shopping, walked a long way home, had a little bit to eat and got a cup of tea. I'm just enjoying the day. It's deliciously good. It's not hot, it's not cold, slightly hazy. Thank you. Complete.
Sam, what about you?
Okay, so other than that momentary outburst where I was not my best self, let's see. My daughter keeps saying to me that she's really happy because she's got 5 dogs. There's about 300 pounds of dog and 1 black cat. And we cook dinner together almost every other night. And we play ping pong every day. And she has her classes online, so she gets them done in like 2 days. And so she's got a lot of free time. She draws like 20 out of every 24 hours. So she's really developing her drawing skills. Other than the occasional teenager snide remark, which actually every parent has to put up with, we actually have a very good relationship. So she can't imagine being in a quarantine in a better place. We're out with clean air, clean water, clean trees, lots of animals, enough food, and only one parent to put up with. So I think she's actually pretty happy. So given that before, when she had to go to school all the time, she hated going to school, She didn't like that whole trek. She likes being at home. So I'm actually happy that she's happy. For me personally, I'm a little bit behind on some work projects. I had given an estimate of 3 to 5 days on this one last very important thing. And the very next day, the CEO says, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? I'm trying to catch up. But it's a nice problem to have, I think. So all in all, I'm pretty good. I just got a puppy delivered to me. My daughter had all 5 of them last night. Usually that's not the case, but so I just got a puppy delivered here. So she's now resting. Anyway, sorry, that's a long check-in. Oh, yesterday we had a very nice Saturday barn raising. Kayla was there. Jaswinder was there. Colin was there. I missed anybody else. Stacy was there. Teese was there, I think. Was Teese? Yeah, maybe. Anyway, so we had a very good session, and we saw some very nice capability from Moreau that Lauren introduced us to. So I'm pretty happy about the way we're exploring this topic of focus in barn raising. So that's fun right now. Just for the record, next week, I think it's Jaswinder next week. And then the week after that will be Charles. And the week after that will be Joshua. And then after that, possibly Kayla, possibly me, possibly somebody else. So we've got the next month just about all mapped out. Oh, one more note. I am actually going to be on my brain mapping this particular conversation. And at the tail end, if I come up with anything interesting, I'll show you guys at the tail end. Over.
Gertrude?
Yep. This weekend has been a special one. Friday starting with finishing the offer for the house we want to buy. Kayla has seen it. And yeah, and yesterday was our wedding anniversary, and today is our anniversary for, 11 years more.
Sorry to interrupt, Gertrude, but just yesterday, Facebook reminded me that I was in Frankfurt just a year ago.
Yeah.
For your last anniversary. So it just sent up all kinds of reminders. So anyway, sorry to interrupt, but that was a fun weekend.
Yeah, this was, I can't imagine, it's just a year. I mean, it's...
Feels like
so we had a big celebration last year, Kayla, and so there were Jazz and Sam and Harry and who else? Tammy. They came over, so it was really great. And so this is the weekend. So we had 23 years married and 34 years together today. So. And I rearranged my office. So, yeah. So it's really been great. Lots of time outside, 2-hour walk, and so really getting the springtime. Yeah, and Friday was a good one because on Friday we had the very first time we managed to do 2 sessions within 2 hours. So that was a premiere. Yep. And first I missed you, Doug, and I thought, oh, and then I remembered that you said you couldn't come. Yes, but
I ended up technologically cut off from the world. My cell phone died Thursday. Internet crapped out Friday. I was deaf, dumb, and
but we
blind.
still managed to get in, and it was great.
I'm thrilled. That's great to hear.
So I'm fine, and I have to leave at 6 again. Sorry.
Kayla, want to do a check-in?
Sure. So this weekend has been full of blessings and challenges. This morning I had to have a difficult conversation with my 8-year-old about online gaming. Apparently he has been in connection with some kids that don't make such great choices. And one of them in particular continues to make bad choices. So I had to have a very serious conversation with him about things that, you know, we shouldn't really talk about unless he's a little older. And I had to remind him that most sane adults don't even speak that way. So, you know, create some boundaries. And today he cannot go online. But I don't worry about him because he's 8 and he loves the outdoors and he's very happy-go-lucky. So that's that. But this morning I had a wonderful walk with the dogs. I have a puppy as well. He's an extremely hyper Siberian Husky, 7 months old. He needs at least 3 hours of walking a day. So it's good to start the morning with that. And yesterday, I'm feeling so much better this morning. But yesterday morning was a little rough, but I still enjoyed that session. As did I enjoy the Friday session. That was wonderful. And now I'm just watching my puppies in the backyard and drinking a shake. So life is good. Thank you. I'm complete.
Stacy?
So, as you know, I've been packing up stuff to move out of this home that I've lived in for 20 years. And I'm finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I think I might actually be out by June 1st. And I'm very excited about that. Still going through, I mean, literally, I have 20 years of paper. I have papers that are 20 years old. So a lot of stuff's getting thrown out. A lot of stuff is getting filed. But also, I managed to find love during the pandemic. So I've been very happy for the past 5-6 weeks. You know, I mean, this is like a surreal time for everyone. But for me in particular, it's like if I were writing a book, it would just be, it's a really exciting time for me. So I'm sort of in my own little cocoon, which I like for a little while. I know it's not going to be forever. And I'm just spending a lot of time, not so much looking back, but more look for the way it's, the way it's worked out. Good. I feel like I've worked really hard and that I'm getting what I deserve. So that's where I am and happy to be here. And this is like my family gathering on Sunday. This is where I look forward to coming on Sunday. When I was a kid, I used to go to my grandparents. Now I come here. And with that, I'm complete.
Colin?
Yeah, it's caught me in the middle of shaving. What's the question?
It's a check-in. How are you?
Okay, well, I'd like to say I resonate with Stacy somewhat, but as you know, I don't get too personal online. But yeah, I'm looking really forward to moving soon somewhere. I have great conflict living here with one particular roommate, and it's really given me a lot of perspective. It's like unblocking times 10 is required in order to be aligned with this person. In fact, it's the type of person you could not be aligned with, I don't think. So the first advice I've had in this area, talking about this one particular block, is just to go away. Like, if you're not happy, you always got the choice to go somewhere else. And I think that's the best advice. There's nothing to win. There's nothing to be proven. There's no contracts to fulfill. It's just a big personality conflict. And while I think somebody has credibility or they're being sincere, then I will definitely give them my time and speak with them. But when you find out that there might be some mental illness involved, then you have to take a different tact. And I'm not one to judge that kind of thing, but you know, I've watched quite a few videos on sociology and different types of people's personalities. And when someone shows great signs of narcissism mixed with violence, there's really nothing you can do except for leave. If they don't show signs of violence, then you can mimic them a little bit and hope for that they can reflect and self-reflect on what's happening. But if this is a person you're dealing with that cannot self-reflect, and they want to be controversial and offend you, then there's really no way to come back on that. And you know, that's partially some of the things I've experienced here in this group, but not to the extent where I think someone's going to be violent. You know, if you just have a different opinion than somebody and you can't see eye to eye with them, then you can try to figure out why that is and how you might be able to possibly continue that conversation if it's meaningful, if it's necessary. If it's not necessary, then there's a lot of things to do with a life than to, you know, split hairs. But I think some of the things are very important, and my kind of involvement in this group isn't for a visit to Nana's on Saturday or Sunday, although that is a nice perk, and I do enjoy that. That's not my purpose. My purpose is more to look at having those difficult conversations and how you move forward with them, and how you could even have tools to guide, so that even a model that could say, you know, this is the space we're in, or something that allows me to know that other people that I'm speaking to are in a different space and they can appreciate the space I'm in, and I'm allowed to be in my different space and they're allowed to be in their different space. And if it's intended that the space have a certain purpose, then everybody might have to conform to the purpose of that space. But trying to come up with, you know, should you be on camera, and you know, all this pettiness that I've come across, you know, being in this group, it really goes to show that it's really hard to get perspective of where people are, where they're coming from, and how to get through this. And so, yes, Stacy, I can't wait to move, because I've come to an impasse, like a huge impasse. And it's a very interesting story. I could get into all kinds of different things about it, and ways I've tried to back out of conflict. And I must say that being in this group has given me some experience to recognize these things, and how to more appropriate deal with, you know, what Sam would say is the 4 agreements, or what Doug would say is getting away from the fear of the situation. Like, what are you actually fearing? Like, you know, can you wake up to what's going on and find a better way to not be a victim here? And but yeah, and I also in a past life, I could say I actually lived with somebody who had mental disabilities, and they were rather violent at times, and so I have experience with this. So it's not something that I enjoy at all. But you know, do you take on the responsibility of, or where are the responsibilities, and what are the offensive lines? And if somebody does offend somebody, did they do it for a reason, or are they just doing it because they want to play with you? You know, so these are the things you have to decide, you know. And I think last week was absorbed a whole lot within this realm. And my question was, if you're going to screw with me, what's the reason? And when the reason doesn't come in a sensible way, then I know that I should just back away because this person's just screwing with you because they want to, or something. So I think you shouldn't offend anybody unnecessarily or unintentionally. There's nothing wrong with offending people at some points in time. It's not desirable, but it happens. How do you deal with it? And that's really kind of what I'm digging in here to the group. Like, what's the, different cultures and different world views and different ideas of what's better. If someone's going to say what's better and become an authoritarian and try to make me do what's better, that's got to be the thing I hate more than anything. From my childhood, I experienced that with religion, as you guys know. So I'm just starting to wake up to the fact that, as individuals, how do we be responsible for what we do, and where are these lines, and how can we not get caught up in misunderstanding when people are trying to be sincere and are trying to lean in? Like, how do we help those people have better conversations? The people that just want to screw with you and tear you apart, there's not a whole lot you can do with those people. They just want to. And that's my experience anyway. So that's kind of my big block today. And I just got through a big episode this morning of what I would call bullshit. So anyway, I'm wired and I'll be quiet.
Tease, are you done cooking? Do you want to do a check-in, or are you erstwhile occupied? Just give him a minute to respond or not. I assume he's still cooking. So, but for you, Colin, I didn't hear. Well, I should
I
check
had,
in.
sorry, I
Oh,
had
there
wet
you are.
fingers and it was blocked. I had to put in the. Now my computer is wet, so now it must be dry. Must be careful. And I was still with potatoes peeling and then getting them in the water. So I just got one in the water and then the other will come. And I was chatting a little bit with someone in Mombasa who's planting the mangroves. So I was taking up with him, talking. So now it was nice to talk with that guy. I mean, not talking, but I used to chat in the Facebook. That's all. So and the rest is sunshine and so on. So that's my check-in of the moment. And thank you for all what you have shared up till now. That's nice to hear. Because I live alone, so I have people in my home having you talking. So thank you. Okay, that's for now. Bye.
Thanks. So, Colin? Sounds like you presented a pretty immediate, living, significant chunk of block.
Oh, again.
You want to unpack? You want us to like be here and unpack a little with you?
No, but I guess there's one more thing I could say that comes to mind, and that is, if you don't have any reason to stick around a person like that, then it's a great opportunity to just just go. Like, rule number, just go. Like, that's what I call alert zero, or whatever the hell we were calling before there. Rule number zero. Just get rid of the violence immediately. Like, just take yourself out of the situation. It's unfortunate that you can't stay where you were, but there's people jumping up and down and setting things on fire. So I guess you kind of got to go. Like, you can't control what people do. You can only control what you do. So, and if you have to be around that person and you have to deal with that person, then sometimes you actually have to get the authorities involved and press charges, because without actually having a criminal charge, the mental health cannot step in and enforce some help. If the person doesn't voluntarily come for help, then you might have to do that, and that's like an extreme case. And I'm kind of you know, one foot on both sides of that fence, because I'm just being a pushover and a softie. They're going to keep taking violence on me. So should I protect against this happening to other people? Should I be my brother's keeper? Should I care? Should I be a good citizen? Or should I just cover my ears and say the next person that meets this person is going to have to deal with it and I'm out of here? You know, like, what does it matter? Like, where are the boundaries? You know, I have no problem with somebody wanting to offend somebody if there's a reason for it. And it usually isn't just the first plan of action. If somebody just comes up and offends you, that's crazy. I'm busy. If somebody comes up and offends you, then you know, it's probably not a good person to talk to. But if it escalates and keeps escalating, there's a pattern to it. So typically I don't start with mockery, for example, when it comes to religion. Like, I like to have a serious conversation about religion. When people start pulling down the lectures and the authority on me, then, you know, I start to maybe go into another space where I try to break up the space that's happening to me, when maybe I should just say, well, we can't have this conversation because we're not seeing eye to eye, and, you know, there's no moderator and you keep talking over me, and, you know, we're raising our voices. You can take any number of conversations Jazz and I have had. Go ahead, John, or Sam.
I'm curious whether you're talking about your living situation or just Windsor, because you're kind of bouncing around a little bit.
Well, yeah, I think Jazz last week was a case of something I think is salvageable, and I do have respect for Jazz, and I do think that he's worth listening to. It's just, I think it's time and place and tact, I think, and, you know, setting up the proper space. Where this other person, they actually live with me and I can't get away from them. And so I don't usually say something until they actually, you know, how do you say, you know, they come accusations like, you took my food, or you did this, or you did that. Just a second. Yeah, carry on. My roommate number one wants to use a washer, so I have to go deal with that, which is civil, you know, whatever.
So something that popped out of that for me that lives is, I'm going to string like 2 or 3 things together, just to sort of put them in a basket and see whether we could dig into them or unpack them. So one piece of the puzzle is being in service, brother's keeper, all of that stuff. In terms of caring for others, all of us or none of us, and the drivers that attach to that. And then the other piece is taking care of self, setting boundaries, you know, being clear about what's an honor to self, and the juggling of the priorities and keeping of that straight, right? So like in Colin's situation, there isn't a higher authority than Colin in deciding whether he wants to put up with somebody or not put up with somebody, be in their zone of contact, or take himself outside of their zone of contact, right? And somehow in the old paradigm, the cultural frame that we live in, most of these things are set up oppositionally. It's like either I'm in service to others, everybody, no boundary, or I'm in service to myself, Ayn Rand, you know, it's all about me. And that those things are in competition or conflict with each other. And I just wonder whether there isn't a new evolved version of that might not make more sense, where if my center isn't coming from fear, I can honor and stay in alignment with me, be in service to others, and being in service to others, not equaling or translating into at my expense. And then it comes down to choosing, where do I decide I've either served enough or given enough for me. And what are some of the sort of informing imperatives around all of that discretionarily? Like, if we're all going to survive as a species, at some point, it seems like I've got to start paying a hell of a lot more attention to folks that are in need. Because whence go they, go me. So I'll stop there. I'm complete. But I wonder whether it's not either or. It's about transcending that choice, framed that way, and coming up with a new orientation around all of it. Yes, Sam.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. So I get the question, because it's a similar question that I've been dealing with for at least 6.5 years. Okay. So in theory, I agree with you. In theory, if we all had infinite patience, we could take care of the narcissist, violent offenders in our lives. But in practice, I actually, and I say this having tried this for 6.5 years, the best of us can do this, what you described, until it's in your living space. If it's in your living space and you cannot get away, the difficulty goes up 100x. And so I actually do understand a bit how Colin feels. If you cannot get away from that kind of behavior, then you have to remove yourself, take yourself out of there. And I've heard Colin talk about this and trying these conversations before. I've tried these conversations in a different context. Okay. So I would have to say, and I agree with the direction that you were headed towards, because if you go zoom out of the personal context, like me and somebody else, or Colin and his roommate, if you zoom out and take a look at all of us, all 8 billion of us, and say, what are we going to do with the violent narcissists here, in this neighborhood being the earth? Okay. We do have to do something. We cannot just say, oh, I'm going to a different planet. Okay. We can't all be Elon Musks. I don't have that $1 trillion. I can't do that. Okay. So I do think we have to deal with it. And that's why every time these problems of civility, of society, of systems of governance and whatever, if they fail to account for how we deal with what Colin says are the mentally sick, or what I said, I don't yet know how to call this behavior, but there's definitely an element that is either out for themselves, doesn't care about others, wants to take all the resources, doesn't care if other people die, doesn't care if other people are hurt, doesn't care if other people are sick, pretty much wants to take care of themselves and their own, and don't care about the future of the planet. There are a number of people like this, and I believe that all of these characteristics apply to some people with massive power. Some of these people hold positions of authority, believe it or not, and they're supported by people with hats. So I think that we do have to deal with this, and I can't figure out how yet. We know bits and pieces. We know that we have to create goodness networks. We have to create systems based on love. I myself believe that Marianne Williamson is onto something, okay? I would like to see her be much more influential in the future. I'd like to see Bernie much more influential in the future, okay? I'd like to figure out how we can produce an education system that does not itself produce these, hat wearers. I would like to see people care about each other. I'd like to see people actually lean into disagreement rather than lean out and go away. I know bits and pieces, but I don't have the entire big picture there yet. So I think, you know, the whole point, I believe, of barn raising, if not GCC, at least in barn raising, we're trying to figure out how all those pieces get put together. You know, how do we want to behave? How do we want to value each other? How do we want to deal with disagreement? How do we want to deal with language? How do we want to deal with triggers? How do we want to deal with potential violence? How do we want to deal with removing oneself temporarily and then yet coming back together again to re-engage? You know, all of those questions are part of barn raising. So I think I am here, as Colin says, okay, to try and figure that out. Saturdays and Sundays is how to figure that out. So in a microcosm, I've got a situation that mirrors Colin's. In a macrocosm, this is what we're here to do. So it's a long rant. I don't have a solution, but I just want to say I actually get pieces of it, okay? Yeah, Gertrude, I see your hand up.
For me, there is one piece that has not been addressed yet. And this is when I'm coming from that concept or from ahimsa, when I'm coming from that there is no is world out there, it's only how the world occurs to me. And so I hope it lands well. It's not about fault or who's to blame or anything like that. It's more about what is my part in it, or how was it created. And it doesn't mean that I don't have to go away. I mean, Doug, you know that I had to step out of a relationship that didn't serve me. That's so the actually doing could be that we have to step out. But Colin, when you were talking about a pattern, and there are several people you have this with. So for me, there is also the question, who am I that this happens to me over and over again? Or how did I create it? Not in a sense of I made it, but more like, what is the pattern that is underlying this? And
getting sucked in. I think the pattern that I do is I foolishly think that they actually care, and I get sucked into their sincerity, and then it starts to escalate. You know, just a conversation about Bitcoin can become, you're a terrorist. Like, I'm talking about science and technology, right? So I think the problem is I give them too much rope and they fool you by thinking, you know, that's the thing. These people are looking to suck your energy. They will fool you into the conversation. So what do you do about it? And when do you get wise to it? That's the question. And then what do you do about it? So I know how I get into it. How do you get out of it? And is it important enough to even give it any more thought? For example, the roommate, not so much. My stepson, a lot.
If you want to, Colin, Friday is open and we don't record it. So we could talk openly about it, and Kayla knows what I'm talking about, and even Jasminda and Doug and Tis as well. So it's not that's the only solution. But if there is something reoccurring, I think it's worthwhile looking at it. And if that layer is out, then we can look at the bigger picture. But if the pattern,
I do invite that actually, and I'm trying to do that with Jasminder, and I would like somebody to actually moderate that, because I think there's a lot of lessons learned. Like, If he thinks I'm being a certain way and I think he's being a certain way, but we both care, well, what's the problem? Like, really, what is the problem? And so I think one of the big problems is we're trying to squish it into a space where it's not appropriate. So to take it offline or to a new space where you say, you know, we're going to actually talk about this, that's golden. That's what we can't do really here we have been, you know, dissecting these things quite a bit, but I think on an average day, we're just going around talking about moving and whatever, you know, and I think you do have a more serious show or approach on Fridays. Unfortunately, I can't take part in Thursdays and Fridays because I'm busy now.
Mhm.
But I would invite that at another time, sure.
Okay. So I'm having to leave in a few minutes. It's good to see you. And Colleen, just give me a hint when you are available, and then we could find a way to do it.
Well,
And we
there's
don't need another
two.
person for it, by the way.
No, that's fine. We could do one-on-one because I know you probably have some insight as well that could be directed individually. I've seen that, and that's good. But there's also, you know, some things. If I'm curious and interested and concerned, I'll bite. So maybe that's in my nature, right? Everybody has different personalities. So I'm saying that, yeah, I will bite on something if I think it's important. But otherwise, I'm just lighthearted and I could care less. You know, there's way too many problems in the world for me to solve. So how do we chunk it up? And I think a big part of it is realizing what space we're actually in when something happens. When people put on their ball hats, they're making a space. Anyway, thank you.
And I would second on what Sam said. I mean, to find out how to deal with each other and not saying, okay, those people, sure, I would exclude this and this and this and this, and then we are left with just a few. That doesn't work for everyone. So how to deal with it in a good way. Yep, I'm done, and I'm going to leave in 2 minutes. So good to see you, everyone.
Yeah.
Stacy, you're
I do think that
Hey, Stacy, we can't understand you.
Stacy, you're breaking up. Oh, did we lose her? We lost her. She'll be back. I think it was internet glitch.
Yes, yesterday she had the same problem. Then she said I had to decide to keep the camera off, and then maybe it functioned then better, but I'm not sure.
Bye, Gertrude.
Yeah, Stacy, we couldn't make out what you were saying. You were breaking up. Not sure whether she's back yet.
Yeah. Hold on, let me find another place to go.
That audio is much better.
You can
Yes.
go on. I'll wait my turn. Yeah, but I want to be able to talk and see you. So let's see. Okay. So what I was going to say is that sometimes I think the lesson for me is that it is time to go. And, I had to recognize that not everything is meant for my plate. Like, that doesn't mean that I don't care about whoever the person is. It just means that I'm not necessarily the one that's meant to move through that with them. And I think sometimes we take on stuff that isn't ours. So I'm sort of, I'm in between. You know, I mean, I spent 18 years in a relationship thinking that I could help and fix, and it was damaging to me. You know, I wasn't strong enough to take care of myself at the same time, you know, and that was part of the lesson. You know, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, and what I do now, which is what helps me, is I'm much more tuned in to the energy of the people that I'm with. And what I learned is, you know, sometimes people are with other people for convenience. It's easier. So they overlook certain things because, hey, it's easier. I don't go with what's easier, because I've learned, at least for me, that every time I allow myself to be somewhere that I know I shouldn't be, out of convenience, the universe comes to slap me around a bit. So, yeah, I to what Gertrude was saying, I really think that it's, you know, our first step should be to look internally and see why things are affecting us the way they are, because there's something in it for us too. And I'm complete.
Well, that's really interesting, because I find when the conversation of religion comes up or spirituality, I have to just accept that part of the group or leave, because I can't fight it. But when somebody starts making suggestions to me personally, that's when I get into these arguments that Gertrude would like to talk about and keep me out of, and Sam would like to keep me out of, and Doug would like to keep me out of. And so when is it time to call bullshit, and when is it time just to say, maha, I'm in a mass space, so I'll just maha, forget about it. You know, when do you let it roll off your back, and when do you make it an issue?
Colin, I don't understand the question.
Stacy said that she doesn't like to make accommodations for people because it ends up biting her in the end. What I'm saying is, for me to be in this space.
I didn't hear that. That's not what I heard.
Okay, restate it again. That's what I heard.
No, I'm trying to see what it is.
But Colin,
Go ahead, Stacey.
no, I was just going to say, Colin, in answer to your question, my answer to you would be, before you leave or any of that, to go inside and say, why is this bothering me so much about what's being said? Not focus on what's being said or what you agree with or what you don't agree with, but why is it causing me such distress to hear it? That's the going inside part.
Yeah, no, I don't think there is any initial stress, and I think it turns into an emotional thing without the proper space or tools to have a sensible conversation when people have different points of view. When can people say, you know what, you have the right to believe what you want. I want to hear what you're saying so that I can understand it. Like Sam just said, that's not what you said. I'm more than willing to say, Sam, you may be right. That's what I heard. So, you know, with a couple of back and forths, you can get to that. But that's hard to do unless you actually make the time for it and you're concerned about it and if it's actually worth it. So yeah, you get sucked into these conversations with narcissists. That's the problem. The conversation today is about narcissists and violent people who don't lean in and want authority over. They wear the hat and tell you what to do. And you don't have a right to do that. And where I know I have the right to sing or practice my guitar, do whatever I want till 11 o'clock at night. But they're going to come out and tell me that I have a right to or not to do this. I could just say, okay, well, that's fine. I'm just going to continue on. If they want to yell in my face, I can just ignore them or move. Like, or what, pick another time that I can accommodate them. Well, that could be if there's a sensible, agreeable relationship going on. But when the guy's just coming out and just telling you what to do because he's not happy with it, you know, it's personalities. Can you get along with the person when, as Sam say, when you're living with them? So yeah, I do agree that there's a lot, and I recognize that this group has helped me look at these things. And I think we can always grow. and start choosing more appropriate, more responsible actions, making choices about what you actually want to put your time and effort into. And I'm saying if I want to put my time and effort into this group, I have to make a lot of accommodations for other people's opinions without challenging them, unless they're directing them at me. And then I feel like I have to correct the record. That's where I run into trouble. So if they were actually directed at me or not is a good question.
There's a piece of this puzzle in the languaging, Colin, that you're using, and Sam, you sort of did a little bit of it too in the way you were referencing that situation of living with, which is the idea of somebody in the context of this conversation, the idea of somebody doing something to me. Now, in my frame of reference, I'm sort of the god of my own existence. So I make choices about what situations I'm in, what relationships I'm in, what conversations I'm in, who I'm interacting with, how I'm interacting with them, and the choices that I make in all of those dimensions and a dozen other facets beyond that, minute to minute, in real time. And within that frame, there is no like possibility of somebody doing something to me. Now that doesn't eliminate or rule out the act of God, right? That's where everybody goes if I say something like that, which is, well, you were walking down the street and you got run over by a truck. Well, you didn't ask to be run over by a truck. You didn't choose to be run over by a truck. You got run over by a truck. I understand act of God. No, I have no control over an act of God. I have no control over something that comes out of left field and takes me out or injures me in some way or hurts me in some way. However, with that as really the only exception, just about every other situation and context and circumstance, I'm in the driver's seat. I'm in control of. So within that choice framework and universe, where does the somebody doing something to me even arise? And I get and I'm directing that, to the room at large, but also specifically, to Colin and Sam, because in the languaging you shared, I got this sense of being done to. And what's living in that, what's that about?
So I'll respond. I think that's a nice framework, but it requires that you actually claim you know and have influence over much more than you do. So in theory, it's nice to have that. But one never really knows. Like, I'm never really going to say, I had an autistic child and I chose that. Or I didn't choose to step in front of the bus. I could have actually gone 5 minutes later. Or I didn't know my ex-wife was an alcoholic until, she was showing symptoms. Or I didn't know that somebody was a narcissist until issues came up in a fairly long pattern. Or I didn't know that there was past heroin abuse because we never talked about that for the first several months. So I think that it's fine to say, yes, I chose everything. And yes, Colin chose everything that happened to him. I chose everything that happened to me. But it's not a useful concept. It's not a useful frame of mind. There are still uncertainties in every decision. And if you say those uncertainties are your own subconscious choosing these things, so therefore you're still at fault, or you're still accountable for those decisions, yeah, I get that. In theory, that's fine. But it's not a useful way to live. because it basically says I have to take responsibility for everything. I have to therefore, blame myself for everything. And that's not, I mean, I know I'm using a lot of language that you're going to jump on, Doug. Okay. But I don't know if no, I'm not going to say that. The point about something happening in your home where you have to be in your home, there is no other home you can go to unless you make very serious accommodations. That is the sense in which you actually cannot withdraw. And there is a point to which conversation hits a minimal rate of return. There's asymptotic diminishing returns to that. And yes, you could also say, well, that's because of your conversation skills. That's because your nonviolent communication skills are limited. Yes, you could say all of that. That is all true. But it doesn't advise in the moment how one actually needs to behave or take action or make decisions. So yes, I will perfectly well admit I'm a little bit triggered by this constant reminder that, yes, you have created everything that is in your life. I completely accept that. I do. But okay, so beyond that then, that doesn't advise me what to do. It really doesn't. I completely accept that, I created all of these situations. But every question I'm asking still is informed by what I'm thinking, what I'm experiencing, what I'm living through. And it doesn't really help to look to that frame of mind and say, okay, how does that advise? Okay, so I know Colin's got his finger up, but
Yeah.
This is something I could go on quite in depth at, because I'll just say one more thing, okay? Is that when one believes that one can actually make reasonable decisions, and therefore, when one sees an opportunity to address a situation where someone needs help, or I could actually go assist in some way, I would like to see a society where we do that. I would like to see a society where we actually help each other. I would like to see a society where if someone is so much in need that I or Colin or any single individual cannot help that person all by ourselves, I would like to see a society where multiple of us, maybe all of us, lean in to help. But that's not always the case. Not enough people care about Colin's roommate to go and help Colin with a situation. Not enough people care about me and my ex-wife to help with her alcoholism. We can't actually all rely on society, although I personally would love to see that. So there's many elements in this. Alcoholism is a very tough thing that many people face. Heroin abuse, similar. And it doesn't help that we have healthcare systems that don't care. They really don't. Now, in AA, there are cases where we try and help ourselves. There's a large organization that actually tries to do that now. And they're somewhat effective.
Somewhat. The statistics are pretty bad, actually. But
no, but some people still claim
it's the only game in town.
My ex-wife, for example, treats AA like her church.
Right.
Okay, and I know she's not the only one. And I know a lot of people go for 30 days, 90 days, and then they're back on the street drinking, whatever. I get all that. Okay. So
I think the check-in is the big part there.
I created this whole thing. Yes, I created this whole thing. Okay, fine. How do we move beyond that to something that's more informative and actionable and dare I say, useful?
Colin, you raised your hand when Sam started.
Yeah, just a brief comment on AA. I shouldn't have interrupted, but I just thought that the way that they check in on each other, which is kind of resonates with this group of our check-ins, and something I don't feel I need too much of, because I'm more like, okay, how do we sit down and play my game? Okay, Jazz, you sit there, I'll sit here. The first thing is this item. Okay, let's describe this item from each person's point of view and how that relates to what it is, the point is you're trying to make. I'll listen to you. Don't talk down or at me, just explain this thing. And then I'll explain to you what it makes me feel like. And then out of these things, we could start probably a 3-day conversation if we would like. But just to say that you offended me and I get no response back of why that offended me, he has the right to offend me, but does he have a good reason? You know, you shouldn't be offensive. That's not a good thing to do. But why would he do that? Well, he didn't intend to offend me. Oh, well, that's okay, then fine. But I was offended. Would you like to know why I was offended? Because you might have offended a bunch of other people. Well, I don't really care about that because I feel really strongly about this. Well, I never got any of the reason. So I don't want to call Jazz out. There's a lot of things he says that's really cool. But, you know, it has been an ongoing thing. And I feel kind of like in that realm of where that game tool that I have is something, if 2 people actually wanted to solve it and like just try a couple of rounds and see where it goes. Because, you know, it's kind of like recording it intentionally, putting the videos in order of the gems while you're doing it. Like, you know, it's preparing to make a case. And if you just want to be lighthearted and whatever, then that's a different conversation. Or if you're having, you know, the conversation that Kayla was having with her son, that's a totally different conversation. So the ones I'm interested in are kind of the ones that, you know, Jazz and I have a difficulty with religion. I'm not barking up that tree because I want to be belligerent or be right. I would like to see a way to map out those 2 different worldviews. And I've got all kinds of ideas in my head of what he might have said, but I don't know if they're still valid or not. And I might even wrote some down on a map. But, you know, I could give you an example, but that would change the conversation. So, you know, of what I think he might believe, that we believe in common, I should say. So where we could write out all the common things is, you know, and I've talked to Stacy about the game. Like she says, if you don't want me to continue on, just interrupt, Stacy. But, you know, we had a contention about whether somebody agreed or not, should they go on to the next step of the game? Because if you don't agree, there's no sense of going on. Well, once we discussed it for a little while, we realized that a lot of times it's not yes or no, but it's just a quick maybe. And once you say maybe, then you got to get into all the different branches of the, you know, and it's a lot of hard work. Doug says, I don't know how you could go through all that work. That's just too much. Life is more easy than that. Well, it's not when you're trying to figure out the misunderstanding. And if it's important, then it's worth mapping it out. And that's kind of what I've been saying. To try to do that in this form is impossible. But to ask Jazz and a couple other people, hey, let's map out that stupid thing that we're arguing about, Jazz, because I'm not even really sure what we're arguing about. I think we agree about a whole lot of things. And, you know, when you get into the woo land, you know you can't back it up, at least not to me. So, you know, there's no good reason why I should believe it, just that maybe I should believe it. And I'll accept that. And it's a stalemate. Let's continue on. If it's such a different worldview that I'm evil now and have no credibility, not worth talking to because he doesn't believe such and such, well, then we're into those big world problems again of the people adapters. And how do you map that out where you know you're in the wrong territory? It doesn't matter what you say. Forget about the narcissists that you know, I'm privileged to live where I am and I could move any second. Doug probably would have moved last week, right? That's what Doug's saying. So, you know, I can control this. I'm moving. I don't care what it takes. I'm out of here. I don't need that guy around me. I've tried to help him, tried to talk to him. Enough. You know, it's just it's not in the dice for me to live here, I guess. I don't know how Doug would make that decision, but I'm sure it would be made.
My universe is not quite so binary. My experience is in any given instant, I've got unlimited choices. And so my reality in your situation, backing up the videotape, would have been, you know, at first meetings and first nose rubbings and first sensing into between you and him, and making evaluations, judgments, and choices about how I was going to relate going forward. Right? You're sharing a situation where
Can I be a little bit
hold on a second, Sam. You're sharing a situation where through my lens, like the moment of choices and decisions
You're
on
right
your
about that.
part were
There's a
way
trail.
past. And this
Yeah,
is
no,
now,
this
we're now in
the
the
step.
middle of the forest fire that you didn't get
Yeah,
out
yeah,
of.
yeah.
In
We're at the 10th step of that game going down the
yeah,
wrong way to
yeah,
agree. So we played
yeah.
the game. We played my game in my head the wrong way. And the reason why
Well,
is because they don't want to lean in. It takes that leaning in to say, okay, well, I do care about what you're saying. So could you say that again?
the piece of the puzzle when you throw in the concept of wrong way is focusing on the judgment rather than the choices.
Well,
I don't
focus.
I,
The results
hold
indicate
on.
that we went the wrong way.
Yeah, no, you went in a way that didn't end up where I think you would choose to be, probably not where he would choose to be. But
And I can see alternate paths if
yeah,
certain adapters were used. That's all I'm saying.
well, the key thing is I'm very clear and aware that the only thing I have control over is me. Like it stops at my skin.
But when you
So
say you want to have a conversation, then you join into something. And
no.
that,
Hold on a sec. Hold on.
yeah.
I'm really clear about my power, authority, control stops with my skin. Like the only thing I control is me. What I do, what I say, where I put my time and attention. That's it. Like, and above and beyond that, it's all about. I'm gonna translate it into your language. At that point, it's all about how I choose to play the game. Right? It's how do I in real time make choices, relationship by relationship, conversation by conversation, action collaboration by action collaboration, etc. So if I'm in a situation where I don't like the result I've landed with and I own responsibility for finding myself there, it's on me to take a look and back calculate and look at how I got there and go, maybe I don't want to do that again, and figure out an alternative approach and course. And, after 64 years, finally starting to get it right for me, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not like it didn't take a long time to
You're
get
talking about some experience.
Yeah, to get to clarity about how I want to do me and how I want in language
sure.
I think that you would relate to how I want to optimize my result.
I'm
You know
not
what I mean?
disagreeing with you with that. I'm just saying
Right.
that the approach we took failed. I think of the game that I play more like an interaction with a mental game as opposed to a physical game. You could go play hockey or go do frisbee or whatever, or you could play a game of maps, or you could go on Twitch, which is even a better mind model of what I'm trying to. Because when you go to Twitch, everybody's going there for a reason. Like it's going to be a new world. It's not going to be this world. And they're all going to enter that space and they're all going to have their own language and the way they do something. It's almost like joining the army or a church. So when we come here, we kind of Twitchify a little bit, but I don't think we're as experienced as the kids being able to get that. So when I'm playing that game that you're
Hold
talking
on a
about,
second.
that's where Jazz and I agree. So I think you got me a little too binary there as well. So
Okay,
I don't think things are a game. I agree there's a history of how things get to where they are. And the more experience you have, the more you can make better choices, right? So it is about making better choices, but define better and with what experience and what context and la, 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 la.
Okay, Sam and
Which is what Sam is saying, which is kind of what Sam is saying. The context is varied.
Yeah, Colin, let me just
Okay,
portion it out. Sam and then Kayla.
I'm hearing something that is dangerously close to victim blaming. Dangerously close.
Who's victim blaming?
What I hear from you, and I am very triggered right now, okay, is potentially victim blaming in a very bad way. And let me explain, okay? If let's just suppose in some world that telling a roommate what to do was actually illegal, okay? Then all of the life that Colin led, in this case, did not lead him to choosing a roommate that would actually violate that law. But he did, right? So now you're actually asking him to take a look at all of his past life choices.
It's worse than that, Sam. I didn't even
Wait,
choose them.
let me finish, please. To then say, oh, well, you actually chose all of these different choices to then lead you to someone who actually violated you with this law, which is very, very analogous to me putting on a short skirt, me putting on a halter top, me walking into downtown, and then, you know, possibly getting cat whistled or worse. Yes, I chose all those things. Cat whistling is actually not against the law, but we can all imagine other actions that are against the law that then, you know, have been for decades been told to girls, don't do this. Don't wear short skirts. Don't wear, you know, spaghetti straps. Don't do this. Don't go into that part of town. And we've labeled that victim blaming. For decades, we've labeled that victim blaming.
I'm not understanding. Hold on. I'm not understanding who's the victim.
Really?
Yeah, I want to, because if I heard you right, I think you just said, Colin, if there was such a law about relating to roommates and whatever, Colin is a victim in that.
Yes.
And you're a victim in your relationship, and I'm blaming you for the relationship you found yourself in.
Yes.
And
yes.
so you're seeing both yourself and you're seeing Colin as victim.
Right. Right. So I'm saying,
and I'm not blaming victims. I'm saying you're not victims.
no, you're saying we could have done different. You should have done better in a sense.
No, I'm not looking back. I'm saying,
no, you are.
How can you do different going forward?
You said your question to Colin was, in the first nose rubbing, you did X, Y, Z. Okay, so you are saying you could have chosen differently in that nose rub.
Is that not true?
It is true, but it's also blaming in a lot of sense. Because
it's not blaming, it's placing responsibility.
Okay, so then is it the responsibility of the young woman who wore a short skirt to take the responsibility for the fact that she was catcalled or worse?
Is it responsibility?
It actually is, right? You're saying
I actually, you know, it's actually, I'll answer that directly. I was teaching a workshop, and there was a young woman that came in, and she had an extraordinary body. She was an unbelievably attractive and unbelievably fit woman, and she dressed to sort of maximize and project that sexuality. And there was an assistant who was doing an exercise in the course of the weekend that zeroed in on her and really triggered a huge reaction for her. In fact, she had been assaulted several times. So her life experience was a series of sexual assaults. What the workshop in the weekend was about was, if that's the pattern and that's the reality that she has found herself to repeatedly visit, it's not blaming her for them happening, but it is examining whether there's any part of that that she can assume control and responsibility for and change in service to not having more assaults in the future.
But why?
That's not, hold on, that's not victim blaming. That's saying, hey, maybe, what about, if you thought about, are there better ways of doing that? And
I think that's why he said close.
That's not blaming either of you for where you are. That's saying, are there ways that you could look at this differently in service to generating a different result? You had your first marriage was to a woman who proved to be an alcoholic. Your second relationship on the heels of that is to somebody who proved to have a drug issue. That's a pattern. Like point one is a point two is a line. You sort of know where this is going. What's that about? Not on her, either of those women's ends, but on your end in choosing and in deciding and making those your relationship moves in Colin's game of life, right? what part of it could you have done differently? And your thing about not knowing, we know everything there is to know about a person within the first 15 seconds of meeting them. We have a huge amount of information. That doesn't mean that people are not really, really prone to having all sorts of internal drivers, motivations, and hidden goals, have them ignore data points and black out data points and not register data points in service to the vision they want to hold, in service to fulfilling their own vision at the back end. Okay? This is not about blaming, it's about responsibility and clarity and understanding, both of ourselves and of others. So I just want to be clear about that.
Okay. I agree with you all about all that, okay? I actually don't disagree. But the question is, why focus on that? Why not focus on where there is some behavior that actually is the offense and actually see if there is something to be done there? Now, I understand this whole thing about control stopping in my skin. I got that, okay? But that doesn't actually negate the fact that if a law was broken, a law was broken. If somebody is raped, someone was raped. And yet the question is always, okay, what did the woman do to actually invite that? I say, you know, why ask that question as the first question? There was a rape that was done. We should be trying to assist. We should be trying to correct. We should be trying to be a strong society. But to go to the woman and say, what choices did you make that led to that? To me, just sounds very dangerously like victim blaming.
I don't think it's about what choices did you make that led to that from a victim blaming standpoint. It's
but
is there any dimension of that? Is there any dimension of that there is learning from in service to changing what you do in the future to
like I said, I agree
you
with
generate the same result? That's the sole point of focus. The judgment part of it isn't part of that.
There's plenty of judgment coming across.
Hell no. Hell no.
There's plenty of judgment coming across.
Hold on a sec. Kayla, yeah.
By the way, hey, Stacia, wait, welcome.
So have you ever heard of the Talanoa dialogue? It is can you hear me? No? Okay.
Yes, yes.
The Talanoa dialogue. I'm gonna go ahead and here's an article that kind of talks about it in conjunction with climate change. So it's a Fijian ceremony, and a lot of similarities in the Polynesian islands have this, where you sit in a circle and you basically storytell. And what you do is you do this without prejudice, without judgment, and storytelling allows you to draw from your personal experiences. In a circle, everybody has their chance to talk, and it allows you to have empathy and for the group to be educated about your personal experiences, and for the society as a whole to come to a general conclusion. Because without empathy, you know, we can't really solve very many of these problems that we have. But it allows everybody this space to just kind of what's bugging them, you know, and allows them to speak. And it also allows you, because I've been in many of these ceremonies, to kind of rephrase your thoughts to where you're not so negative, or where it's more constructive and you're not so personal except for your own story, so to speak. So anyways, I wanted to share that with you because I think Colin was talking about religion, like for instance, you know, that it's a really good tool to be able to say, this is my experience with religion. One time I was employed with a church and the pastor did this and that, you know, and it just made me think about God in a really bad way. And, you know, everybody in the group kind of thinks about it. And then they have their non-prejudice kind of say so about it, if you will. And it comes from a place of love too, you know, love and education. And I just think that's really important. But yeah, I went ahead and put this article in there about climate change. I think it was the UN or the NPR, I don't know, who got all these countries together, and they put their story in it, and they had their own little Talanoa Fijian ceremony on their own. So I'm complete.
Yeah, no, that sounds really good. I don't know if you froze. Um, the idea of having the space, like this ceremony you're talking about, is kind of the thing. Like, we've taken this conversation today quite a somber area, so I can make a heartfelt plea to have a conversation about religion or whatever in the proper context, as opposed to not after an argument that was had. Like, why don't we talk about this somewhere else? And then I hear, oh, well, you don't want to talk about it here. It's like, no, let's not go down that road. Let's just de-escalate. Let's take this conversation into a space like what you're saying and talk about it. There's no problem with people finding personal strength from their spirituality. I have friends who are very religious. My mother's religious. It's all over the place. There are some scientists here who I think are what you would call agnostics, atheists, and I think, how do we have those different worldviews here and still share and agree? I think is kind of the thing, and not disparage each other. And I think it's by not making overarching claims, like, for example, you should make a decision a certain way because you don't know what else to do. So just put your faith into something that you don't have any knowledge of. That might not be the best advice for somebody. If it works for you personally, that's great. So yeah, and religion and politics are both in those lines of trying to figure out what's better with what resources within the human tribe. So it's kind of what we're talking about today, especially when people aren't leaning into the conversation, when they're actually people who have malicious, or how do you say, willful ignorance, or just manipulation of the conversation. I think Stacy had a discussion in the GCC barn raising, and she had a lot of really good questions about, what do you think is a good conversation? What do you think is a bad conversation? And sorry, Stacy, I forget the other question. And some really good stuff come out of that. And one was, manipulative conversation. So the idea of this game that I talk about is to try to look at it more scientifically, but allow whatever emotion you want, but just make sure you keep track of stuff intentionally as you try to define your terms and get the best representation of what the other person's trying to say. And then you can make a decision whether you want to use that information. I think the person being able to at least speak what they believe is a big part in diffusing the situation. When people just cut people off and say, you never let me explain it. That's kind of what they're doing in barn raising right now. Each person gets an hour to explain what it is they want to talk about, and also with the idea also of how do we measure the focus of what we just did, and did it make it better focus? Is this something we would like to adopt going forward? But Sam could talk, so this group is about finding better ways for, I think, people to coexist, disagree better. And there's a lot of different views that are just not very well aligned. And how do you just say that's a no-go zone without saying it's a deal breaker? Maybe it's a fact that some humans are not meant to be dealing with other humans because there's just too many deal breakers between them and their worldviews or something. I don't know. But to know that ahead of time before you get into a relationship with it might be valuable. Maybe Doug's right. Maybe there are no deal breakers. But if we can't map them out in a serious conversation, then how do you know what the other person's trying to say? So that's my big frustration here, is that we haven't managed to offline some of these conversations like religion. And Sam was planning on doing one. And I hope you come to barn raising and do one on Saturday. You're thinking about it, and maybe I think Sam's onto something with that, allowing people to be heard and try to moderate in their own style. And maybe it's part of passing the talking stick in a long way around this circle, we're just, instead of having one meeting, we're having one meeting over many, many weeks where each person gets to have the talking stick. And so there's no excuse for them not trying to say what they have to say. And I could go on about that some more, but I'm now taking barn raising time and putting it into unblocking time. And maybe that's a good sign, I don't know. But yeah, the religion is a really hard one, and I don't want to offend you in that if you have faith. Jazzwinder as well has some spirituality. I really don't know how to deal with that other than keeping my opinion to myself until someone imposes their opinion upon me. They make a claim that, you know, I'm supposed to use in some way. That's where I have a problem with it. And in this forum, I just try to avoid it now. So, and speaking to you about it, I think this is I'm throwing down the gauntlet, like, you know, what do other people think? Should we discuss religion in this forum anymore? Or should we have a special place for that? Or, you know, when it gets to that zone where people are starting to preach, that hasn't happened today, but it's happened in the past.
Alex, and then Sam.
I was thinking about the person with high empathy and wisdom in the middle of the swing area of the scope of the pendulum. And you've got atheists at the other extreme, and swing it up the other extreme, you've got religious fundamentalists. And in the middle, you've got people who understand the clash, the binary thinking of the people who don't seem to have the cognitive ability to notice that there's a wide spectrum of diversity amongst spiritual beliefs, and people who have empathy for the weaker sex, the weaker people who have injuries and less cognitive development than the wiser people in the tribe. And that makes for a more cohesion within the whole community. It lifts the whole community higher. So if you believe that you're the highest power in the universe because you don't have any woo-woo beliefs, no religious connection with a God of your own understanding or a power greater than yourself, then you believe you are the greatest power in your universe.
No.
And it's not true. So, you know, that's good that you
well,
admit. It's good to see you admit
claims.
that.
Yeah.
And you,
Colin,
a little while
Colin,
ago,
hold on a second.
Colin was just talking about how interrupting was a disruptive effect on the group and the moderation. And then he goes ahead and does it himself.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Hold on.
Sam, and then Stacy.
I actually wanted to do a little bit of a diversion. Stacia Scoggins just joined us today, and we're here on Kimono Island, and we actually haven't met yet, but as part of the whole coronavirus thing, I was trying to get some of the local neighbors here connected via Zoom and others. And Stacy expressed interest, but I tried a couple of times and there wasn't much other take up of that invitation on the island. So I mentioned this particular session to her and she did show up. So I just wanted to acknowledge Stacia showing up, and probably landed in a fairly serious conversation here. But I just want to acknowledge your presence and say thanks for coming.
Yes, welcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, since it's all about me. I wish it wasn't. I agree with a lot of what Alex said. Go ahead, Jazz.
I'm interrupting just because I've had my hand on the digital thing raised, so I didn't have to be this guy.
Stacy also.
Please. Okay, go ahead. I'll reply later to Alex.
Yep, just letting Doug know that I had the digital hand raised for about 25 minutes now.
I'm not seeing it on my screen, Josh. I'm not sure why.
I had a feeling.
Is anybody else
I had
seeing?
A feeling that was.
Yeah, it's not. It didn't show up. If it had worked, then you would have.
No
I would have
problem.
responded immediately, but I didn't. It's
I
not
had that
visible.
feeling. That's why.
I'm glad you.
I had that feeling,
and if you raise your hand in front of you because of the portraiture black,
okay,
you can't see.
Well, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I'm gonna unraise my hand. Sam, go ahead, and then I'm just letting you know I'm here. That's all. I'm just using my voice. So I'll
Welcome.
unraise my hand. Go ahead, Sam.
My hand is up as well.
Stacy, why don't you go next and then Sam?
On camera, not get kicked off again. But
Stacy, the audio connection is breaking up.
Yeah, Stacy, your audio is unintelligible.
Stacy?
No, it's just wah 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 wah.
Can you hear me now?
It's breaking
All right, let me
up.
walk in the other room.
If your
Can
video,
you hear me now?
it's still rough.
Still breaking up?
Very crunchy.
Yeah.
Oh,
If your
all
video,
right.
if your video is on, turn that off. Maybe that'll help. I don't know.
Your video's not on.
I'm off on video.
There
It's
you go.
not off. It's off for me.
It is off.
Oh my goodness.
It is off.
It was off.
Yeah.
It's off now. Oh God.
What did we miss?
I can't trust this anymore.
It would be on the recording if it was on.
Hey, can you hear me? Can
Yes.
you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
that's good.
Yeah, no,
I just would like to go back to a point because Colin had brought me up a few times in conversation, so I want to clarify. What I had been talking to Colin about and the maps and the games that we had been doing, as far as disagreement goes, what I meant is, for example, in this conversation, Doug, and I don't think you were victim shaming at all. Or victim blaming at all. I'm totally with you on this. So my point would be, for those people that thought that there was merit in what you were saying, that would go on to be another conversation. Once people had already accepted, okay, maybe there's something to this. Let us look at our own patterns in what we're playing out. That would be one conversation. Those people that didn't buy into that, in my opinion, shouldn't be participating in that conversation. Similarly, the people that don't agree, that's a separate conversation. Conversation's wrong. If you can't even get to that one same starting place, there's no point in all taking off together because it's not going to go anywhere. So I just wanted to clear that up, and I'm complete.
So I understand what that is trying to do, Stacy, but doesn't that actually make it less likely that we actually cross the misunderstanding divide? You know, I myself am very interested in why I don't see eye to eye with someone, and I want to lean into that disagreement. I don't want to do it violently. I want to actually do it with curiosity.
Okay. So if I could just add something, Sam, if I just can interrupt you really quick so I don't forget. The point is, you could still listen to the conversation, but similarly to like what Kayla was talking about, the storytelling, maybe you would gain some insight into listening to the storytelling and listening to that process, as opposed to being part of it and derailing the direction that it would go in.
Why is it a derailing if it's actually leaning into the disagreement? I mean,
because put it this way, there's no way I can tell you straight off, there's no way you're gonna convince me that I don't have something to do with the experience in my life that I'm creating. I already know that.
I'm not trying to convince you of that. I'm not trying to convince you of that.
But what I'm saying is we can be stuck on that one point, or we can move on to the next point without being stuck there. To me, it's like pushing against a wall instead of just walking around it. I mean, even if you just want to take an imaginary journey on someone like Sam, little Sam might be playing without him realizing it. And that's at least moving forward.
Basically, your audio is unintelligible to me.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to be quiet then for the rest of it. I don't know what else, unless I try to go off and come on again. But I'm just going to listen for now.
Wait, is it just me? Is everybody else getting a
No, it
crunchy,
just cleared toward the end of that. I'm not quite sure why. Are you moving, Stacy, or are you stationary?
Yes, I'm trying to move to a better spot.
You know, it's almost as if somebody's got a button in their room, and when you talk, they press that button, and it makes your voice go garbled. When they take their finger off that button, we can hear you clearly.
Yeah, it's odd.
Yeah, I'm just going to be quiet for now.
You sound fine now, wherever you are.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Very frustrating.
So Sam, I think part of the question is leaning in the energy and the curiosity that Kayla was alluding to in that ceremonial form, or is leaning in, getting into argument, getting into debate, and I think the distinction between the two for me is if I'm coming from curiosity and openness, then I'm inquiring into. If I'm cruising for a bruise, and if I'm looking for a fight, then it's about assertion of my beliefs and somebody else asserting their beliefs, and then the fencing back and forth in service to arriving at a place of somebody winning. And those two energies are just completely different. And the culture and frame and world that we live in, the dominant theme of people communicating to each other is the latter, not the former. It's fencing, it's power, it's authority, it's who wins, who's right, who's wrong, all of that. And judgment is sort of the bedrock and foundation of all of that stuff. I don't have judgment operating for the most part as a primary driver or consideration. I'm mostly interested in understanding and just sort of getting as clear and clean a signal as I can get, and inquiring into and service to understanding where a person I'm talking to sitting across the table is coming from. As a starting place, once I have some semblance of understanding, then I have, questions and places to go, interests to follow, or not, depending upon what emerged. But I don't have any right or wrong energy or judgment energy of what somebody else says going on. And I've sat across the table from some people with some pretty horrendous beliefs, or who have done some pretty horrendous things in their past. I don't relate to those from a place of judgment. And I'm complete. And Jazz has company.
Hi, Guru.
This is, pardon me, this is Stacia. Am I able to be heard? Am I heard now? Am I on
Yes,
audio?
you are.
We can hear you,
And good
Stacia.
to hear your voice.
Are you still in the car?
I am in the car sitting at Camino State Park. Yes, I am. This is my spot. My question is, obviously coming in so late into the conversation, I'll try to be on time next week. Has there been a conflict that you all are trying to decide how not to have conflict? Can someone catch me up a wee bit? And the reason I ask for that is that if this is a forum for people to to share, to educate, to grow, that cannot be done without conflict. So is it a matter of not wanting to have conflict in this forum, or is it a matter of how to manage the conflict when it happens? Can someone update me on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to, if that's okay. So, Stacy, we have 4 different calls a week. The first one is an open conversation where anything can happen, conflict, all sorts of things. It's called Open Thursdays. On Fridays are experiments to see who wants to try to stand up some sort of experiment. So at the moment, it's a lady in Germany named Gertrud who's doing an experiment of deep diving on a methodology and a practice. She's been standing up with a book she wrote, and she's practicing her skills from German to English on Friday. And that changes to different Fridays. On Saturday, Sam runs a group called Barn Raising, where we practice a word he coined. I think he coined it, but I'm going to give you credit, Sam. It's collaborology, the best ways we can collaborate and build things together and co-work together. And then Doug said, you know what? Some conflicts arise during those 3 calls. What if we had a Sunday call called Unblocking, where we unblock things that arise during those calls? And that's what this Sunday is an unblocking. And some days it's creates more conflict. Some days it's unblocking, and it's always changing. And so I'm just letting you know, you walked into an unblocking of 2.5 years of conversations 4 times a week. So that's where we're at, if that helps, Stacy.
This is Stacia. It does help.
Stacia, sorry.
Hey, Stacia, a little bit of also additional context. I was bringing up a personal case where many people here know that I'm divorced from an ex-alcoholic wife, and then managed to find myself again with a girlfriend who I then discovered had been seriously abused when she was very, very young, and then had made some bad life choices after that. And then Colin was talking first about his roommate and difficulties he was having with his roommate, telling him what to do, and I guess was a violent narcissist. So anyway, those were what sort of prompted this particular thread of conversation today, Stacia.
Okay, that does clarify it. I guess overall, from what I've come to understand of life in general, regardless of the subject matter, there must be conflict. You cannot create without conflict. So while I am not a person who likes to entice conflict on a regular basis, my personal opinion is go to it. You can discuss how to manage conflict as much as you want. How about just have it, knowing that you're going to come away from it, knowing more about each other and more about yourself. Does that perspective not allow for more open conversation about a true subject rather than just how we manage the conflict? But now that I understand where you all are, I can sit back and listen more open-mindedly.
Yeah.
So thank you for that clarification.
No, thanks for joining. Let me
I have to go. I promised Charles Blass that I would call him on the hour exactly, so I'm going to say goodbye. But I had my hand raised about 45 minutes ago, and I just wanted to say there's 4 things. Empathy leads to compassion. Compassion leads to dignity, and dignity leads to respect. If you give someone their dignity, then it helps to give them the respect. And those 4 things, I believe, lead to unblocking and understanding where people are coming from. And thank you guys. I didn't want to take up any bandwidth. Please continue, Sam, keep unblocking. And we're at the place too where we're unblocking other parts in our life, not just with each other, so that we can be better to the people in our community. So it's gone beyond just unblocking with each other. So thank you guys. Much love. Go ahead, Sam, and nice to see you, Stacia.
Yeah. Yeah, Stacia, a little bit of 30 more seconds of background. In September 30th of 2017, 2 or 3 of us submitted a proposal to a group in Sweden called the the Global Challenges Foundation. They were looking for ideas how to create a better world. And so the key idea that we proposers came up with was we need to be able to listen to each other and get the best ideas out of each other and support each other. And so these conversations grew out of that proposal. And so every week since then, since October of 2017, at first it was once a week, then it turned out to be twice a week. So now we actually have 4 conversations per week. And it is the structure that Josh just described. But the larger arc of it is that in February of 2018, I started getting a little bit pokey. I started, getting a little bit on some were uncomfortable topics, and that did raise some discomfort with some people. And because there was an expression that was not desired, I sort of backed off a little bit. And recently, we've become much more attuned to the fact that there's a sense in which we can disagree well, that we can actually be curious, be generous, be listening, and not be so much prescribing, asserting, et cetera, et cetera. And some of us have begun to make that shift to really try to figure this out. And we're trying to do it, yes, in a non-violent, non-confrontational manner. And various of us are still at different stages of that shift as I interpret it, okay? And so we all have different stories about it, but that's one storyline that's been going on for about the last 2 years as well.
Wonderful. I like it all.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna add a punctuation to all of this, which is the sort of there's a meta inquiry to this, which is how do we do us differently? How do we evolve and figure out how to talk to each other, how to communicate and connect. If we can figure out on the fundamentals of that a way of doing that better, then it informs and increases the odds of success of us being collectively able to avert going extinct. So it's sort of going to first cases and starting from the beginning and exploring and digging into how we do this differently and how we do it better. So I just wanted to add that. Jazz?
Thank you.
We are doing ourselves. Sorry, Stacey, I thought you'd finished. Stacey? Well, it's 18:03 here. It's nearly time to check out now. I'm getting a little hungry. We have and are doing this better. The base rules, especially over the last 3 or 4 months, have changed. Somebody's been pushing to change them, and I'm glad to see they are changing. I was at one point in today's conversation thinking of stepping in, and then I thought better of it because the conversation started off initially from one point of view, from one particular statement that things were not going well at the residence. And slowly but steadily, my name came into it. And then other conversations impeded with their opinions and their observations onto that. And toward the end, before Stacia made the inquiry, it was extremely confusing. And whereas I would tend to agree with Kalia that perhaps the wisdom round would benefit, I'm not so sure. There are too many attachments.
Yes.
There is no kind of trying to deal with the problem itself. There are too many personalities being bandied about and conjectured and what would happen, what would not happen. And I was going to venture my opinions on the personalities, I really tend to agree with the community section here that one has to know oneself first, the limitations, especially the limitations. And the question that arose in my mind was, if I were in that situation, what would I do, regardless of how I got into it? And there were certain points where I thought I'd give way. And at certain points I thought, yeah, well, if somebody's pushing me hard enough to get rid of me, there's something underlying that in their agenda. And I would want to know why. Is it being a person of color? Is it prejudice? Or is it my presence? Or am I too dominant? I would like to know the answer to some of those and other queries. And the biggest query is, if I decide to stay, can I handle it? Do I want to handle it? And that is the crux of the matter. If I thought I could handle it, I would stay. And I've done that many, many times, just for the experience. So I'm not in any particular way wanting to pursue this any further. We had a whole 2-hour session yesterday, which satisfied the parameters and the questions I had. And I'm of the opinion now that I really want to leave it alone. I cannot take it any further to anybody's benefit. It's up to the person and persons concerned to better themselves in whatever way they think fit, to fit the purpose. The purpose is obviously life and all that it entails. With that, I'm complete. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm getting a much clearer picture, and it all just sounds like you're doing what we all do in every setting of our life, which is to find out how we address life together and separately. And there are not many forums that I have found that have even, frankly, held my interest this long. So this is a very good thing, and I really appreciate getting to be here and hearing these clarifications.
May I add one more thing to what Jaswinder offered? Doug, it may be not so apparent, but I agree with you like 99.5%, okay? The 1.5% I would like to throw in a little bit here is that instead of saying get to know yourself first, or Jaswinder, get to know yourself first, it's get to know yourself also. Because we're doing a lot of things on a lot of different fronts. So I can't prepare myself and then engage with life. You know, I'm engaging with life. I'm chopping wood, I'm carrying water, and at the same time, I have to introspect and I have to learn from others and I have to learn from experience and learn from history and learn from, you know, mentors and learn from friends, etc. So we're all doing these things in parallel, you know? We're being triggered in parallel, we're growing in parallel. We're executing life, we're doing our job, we're cooking food, we're doing laundry, you know, everything is in parallel. And so life is dynamic, okay? So at some point, you know, maybe 0.5% of my brain is more towards being triggered. On another point, maybe 0.5 of my brain is more towards learning. Maybe, you know, so there's always different, you know, sine waves going on inside a person. And that's natural, okay? So I'm just asking that we actually understand that this is the case rather than say, okay, well, you know, let's sit back. Let's figure out how, you know, my decision to wear a short skirt, you know, brought me to this particular, you know, courthouse today. You know, I don't want to ask that question when I'm living life. There's a more useful question. And, you know, these other historical questions, yes, they do provide insight. Yes, we can go into those kind of sessions, but there are decisions to be made. There's life to be pursued. And right now, the sense of urgency I'm feeling is no matter what we do today, whether we learn or whether we connect or we love or whatever, the planet is burning. You know, the animals are disappearing. You know, trees are disappearing. So to me, I can't divorce myself from that sense of urgency, that sense of timing. And that's not an excuse to not introspect. It's basically a reminder that says we have to live life, we have to chop wood, carry water, at the same time that we try to learn how to do things better, how to be ourselves better. And this 2-hour block on a Saturday and Sunday is a huge luxury. I would say out of 8 billion people on this planet, maybe a couple dozen people could do this, you know? But I don't see 8 billion people on the planet doing this, okay? So if we're doing this, let's do this with that real sense of what it is we're trying to do here. It's not a social gathering purely, okay? Yes, it can be social. We are all social animals. We've all learned to like each other and love each other and, you know, really like the fact that we're all disagreeing well, or as well as we can, okay? But there is still a planet that's at stake. And that's what I'm really trying to remind myself every day. Over.
Kayla, you want to do a checkout?
Yes, I do. No. I was about to write you guys and say I've got to feed the kids and I got to feed the dogs, and I love this session. It was very enlightening. Thank you for allowing me to share in this space. Every one of you, I love it. So thank you. But have a wonderful day or evening.
Colin, you have a checkout? We can't hear you. I'm not sure why. You're not muted in Zoom.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Say something. Say something.
Technology. Yeah, so try to keep this short. A lot of interesting things were brought up. I think we're doing really well because we didn't veer off onto the conversations as usual when topics are brought up. I'm appreciative to Jazz for having constraint and realizing what's important and what would be the right space to argue. I don't appreciate us doing that. And if he was referring to me, you know, that's good. I still think we should continue on with that conversation. If not, then it's not worth enough. But there's still going to be an overall separate conversation I'm hoping is coming up about the usefulness of using religion as an authority. I would think that's how I would frame the conversation. How you use religion as a personal strength is none of my business. So, and then because it's the claims of being an authority and you should do things this way or that way is where I rile against abuse of authority in that way. Now, you know, if you come across a narcissist and they're abusing your good graces and your space, then you really only have one choice, and that's to find a better space, because we're all animals on this earth and we can't control how other people act. So with the experience that we have, like I believe both Doug and Sam are talking about, the question is, how do you or we like to reflect and remember and ask for clarification? Like, how do we do that? And how do we do that sincerely and avoid the manipulative work of other people with special vested interest? Because a conversation does not start when you press record. And in order to know where you stand on these things, it's important. So how you answer that, it's just a rhetorical question, really. But I think that comes to the heart of it. And I see a scale, a continuum for both your expression that you can have, whether you're going to have just a little game, you're going to go, you know, watch a ball game or be in a ball game, or have a debate or philosophical conversation or play a game of chess, whatever game that you're doing, whatever, you know, learning to play guitar, you know, taking your kids to the park, play some games. Like that's the games I'm talking about. There's no winners and losers per se. It's just how permanent is it? And on the other end of that expression scale, you got journeys and quests. And I try to make maps of what those might look like, and we could fill in the details. On the other side, you have the conflict. And there's going to be conflict when you're talking about different points of view. So it comes down to free speech. Can you have free speech and expression? And you can have a conflict inside you. You don't have to make it violent. So the continuum of the free speech line is, when does your free speech pick up a sword and say, I'm going to defend these beliefs against you, or I saw you blink first, or the Mexican standoff, or whatever. So these things are all on a continuum. There is no black and white. And Sam talks about, you know, where in the continuum maybe we should be concentrating and how much of a luxury we have here. And I think that a lot goes to that. And I just want to say the last thing about the need for conflict is that it seems that it's most dangerous when it's between friends and family and people you're close to. Because, you know, that's when you're vulnerable to really express the truth of what it is you're explaining, and not just hand them off like this doesn't matter. This, somebody said something to me at the market, and forget about him, right? This is conflict between, you know, or conflict between countries, or, you know, important conversations. Those are the ones that you have to color with all of this tiresome work, as Doug says. And I think it comes down more to the people being willing to realize that they're in the conversation and they're going to try to lean into it. You know, if there's a bully, it should be known, right? And I think, you know, that's what's so maddening for like a lot of people in the United States right now, because I, like a lot of people, think Trump exerts symptoms of being a bully, or maybe, you know, some of the dark triad going on there. I don't know. You know, maybe he's being controlled by people and he's actually doing us good, and he has to act that way because we're so crazy that we would eat ourselves politically. So you have to put some clown up front so we can blame him instead of ourselves. I don't know, because I think we're all to blame to some degree. And it comes down to territory and trying to define what's better. So if you want to try to define what's better, you got to have serious conversations where it's not just like a quick conversation, and you have to keep track of it, and lean into it, steel man, all of those different things. And if you're not willing to have that conversation, then maybe you shouldn't, you know, or you shouldn't be taken so seriously in what you're saying, I guess. And that's what Sam, I think, is trying to teach me. Don't take it personally. They're not even serious. But in this forum, I feel vulnerable. So it's a little bit different than if we were just talking. Like the things I say to my roommate, I wouldn't dare speak online. And maybe that should be a lesson for me. Maybe that's what Gertrude's talking about, but it's gone beyond, it's accelerated beyond sensibility, and I should be smart enough to know that. And I am. So how much am I actually getting entertainment out of this, and how much, you know, I'm not enjoying it, so I might as well not do it. But I think a lot of what I do is trying to diffuse the situation, and the best solution to diffuse it is just to hang up. Boom. If you get in that situation, that's what I'm trying to talk about. Here, we should do the hard work, not hang up. That's my impression. Anyway, thank you.
Alex?
I'm thinking about this 30-second elevator. When the other people in the elevator, 80% or 75 to 80% of the other people in the elevator are of a religious nature, some kind of religion and spirituality background. So if you've got to pitch something to that crowd and you're aiming at the 15% of atheists, you're making a classical error of judgment. Over.
Keith? Closing?
Well, it was nice to be here. So thank you. I was just listening and enjoying. So not much to add. As the food is ready. So slow cooking. So I'm going to eat soon.
The audio,
Stacia?
yeah, I'm sorry. The audio quality is ebbing once again here on Camino. You know, maybe a challenge that you might want to consider taking on, each and every one of us, just as part of the human species. I had to get myself to the point of before engaging in every conversation, whether that conversation was with another or, forgive me, within my own head, was to completely drop the word should from my vocabulary. Because I've been with so very many people from around the world in different ways. And it was my fear of not being able to hold my own intention and my own energy and frankly my own ego. I was using the word should. I found myself using the word should quite often many years ago. And I noticed that in all ways, in all aspects of life, including raising my children, that when I dropped not only the word, but the mindset of should, it just left things more open. So I challenged myself with that for 1 year. And I have to say it was rather life altering. So whether it came to science, diagnosis, prognosis, religion, spirituality, how you raise your children, when I was doing parenting classes in my community, the beauty that came, the transformative beauty that came not only in my own life, but in the relationships around me, when we agreed to stop using or thinking the word should, was remarkable. Maybe that is something that each and every one of us could consider giving a shot. What might the world be like if we could drop the word should and replace it with could it be? Could it be is an opening rather than a closing. And that's a good word for me to use, closing. So I want to thank you all for allowing me to share. And I am going to sign off. Thank you very much. I will be back.
That's terrific, and thank you for coming.
Thanks for joining us, Stacia. Hey, should we drop the word should?
I should.
Yeah, there's an expression that a teacher of mine was fond of, which was it's generally not a good idea for us to should on each other.
Yeah.
And so for me, you were preaching to the choir. I'll wrap. I really appreciated this session. And it's a lot of moving parts at the same time, Sam, to your point about, being busy and doing, and then paying attention to how we're being. And, I think once upon a time, as a species, we knew how to do both those things at the same time. Indigenous populations still remember and know how to do those things at the same time. And so my hope, prayer, fervent aspiration is that we can rediscover and relearn how to do that at the same time. And I think that this place is a sandbox for us figuring out how to do that. And albeit challenging and counterintuitive, if we keep pushing against the boulder, we might actually figure out how to do that differently and effectively. And if we do, then we have the ability out of this humble place to change the world. So, the species collective salvation can come from anywhere, including here. So with that, I thank you all and have a great remainder of your Sunday. And Tees, happy meal.
Let me add just one more thing, just very brief. Just as the word should is a bit triggering, to me, the word or the answer or the question that starts with why is also triggering. Why did you do this? Why didn't you do it the other way? So to me, a lot of these questions about could I have made a different choice? Okay. It's difficult to get to really considering that question without feeling that, oh, geez, I should have done better. I'm using that should word there, right? So should comes with a why. Okay, the why says, oh, I did it this way, and I should have done it the other way. So all of that is mixed in together.
If you imagine taking the judgment out, good, bad, right, wrong, black, all that, take the judgment out completely, which also automatically, instantaneously eliminates shoulds. There are no shoulds. There's simply what happened, what didn't happen, what choices were made, what choices weren't made.
If you've been through a lot of workshops, and you've been through a lot of therapy, and if you've been through a lot of classes like this, I get that, okay? But many times we're in conflict with people who haven't had those, I'll even call them luxuries, okay? They're just dealing with life. They're dealing with the way they've been brought up. They're dealing with, the standard language of the times. And I would like to come into a way of engaging where it's not so much this self-examination that for many borders on the why. It borders on, could you have made a different decision? And that's really the thing that I'm saying is dangerously. I said it was dangerously close to victim blaming.
Stuff that's in the rearview mirror is in the rearview mirror. There's nothing you can do about any of that.
Hold on.
It's not about what happened in the past. It's about what's upcoming in the future.
One little thing.
It's too easy.
One little thing. If in our stories of ending up here, if there had been one comma in the wrong place or one word in the wrong place, would we be here? There are stories that if you take a story, you read the whole story, and it hinges on one word somewhere in that story, or one comma in a sentence that changes the whole story. Would you be here?
What's the point of the question?
It happened the way it happened for this to occur. There is a reason for all the decisions that have ever been made. The thought comes first. You said that. You see?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. But it's about the present and forward.
So you have to look in the rear view mirror as well. Otherwise, you might get buggered from the rear.
Well, there's a question. Yeah, there's a question about whether you're looking in the rear view mirror, or whether you're looking at the person who is doing the looking. And I am a big believer in looking at the me who's doing the looking. The story of what happened back then is completely irrelevant. It's the how was I looking at my world at that time that had me make the decisions that I made. That is invaluable. But the story, the specifics and the details external to the me who was living that at that time, completely irrelevant. And people get really hung up on story. They really want to chew on stories. They really want to chew on what happened and who did what to who and all that stuff. But who I was in my doing of my past, that's always worth looking at in service to me doing me better tomorrow than I did today, and me today being better than I was yesterday.
And that is the link to the others wanting to know your story. You are being emulated. I'm being emulated. We're all interconnected. That's the big understanding. I'm not saying anything you're not saying. I'm just saying it slightly differently. That's all.
That's not always true.
Which bit?
Yeah, but that's okay, because we can find ways to clarify. Because you're right.
Nothing is always. When you say something's not always true, it's like stating the obvious. Everything has the possibility of being wrong.
Or different.
Well,
Yeah.
I would go ahead. Go ahead. I had a point earlier that I didn't make, and in this extended session, I think I could make it. I picked the points now, try not to overtalk. But this one was about what is the case that we might have strengths and weaknesses? And maybe Doug has a super strength in a certain area, but when it comes to defending, maybe he's not the soldier. Maybe he's the, takes a different role. Or in baseball, maybe he does better as a pitcher or first base. Doesn't mean he can't be on the team. It just means if he's, a better catcher, then maybe we should let somebody else pitch. So maybe there's a case to say that sometimes when Doug and Sam are at loggerheads, I see what Doug is, and Stacy sees what Doug is saying different, and I agree with Sam as well. So I have taking away positives from both. And the positive I take away from Doug is I think about what Sam took offense is, sure, if you're gifted to have the knowledge of self-awareness, that's great. But if you don't, hey, Doug will tap you on the shoulder and say, why don't you stop digging that hole? Do you realize stop digging is an option? Why don't you, you're digging that hole, stop digging it. And if you've already stopped digging and you're figuring out a way to fill the hole, then maybe you're more into Sam's conversation. And, I don't know if that's a good way to explain it, but, it is a continuum, and it does depend on of what just happened and possibly a little bit of history. I don't think you can erase the past, but I do like the sentence that the saying, the past is a guidepost, not a hitching post, right? So anyway, we'll just say that. So maybe we're not all super skilled at everything. So sometimes, Doug, you might have to say, you know what, Sam, you would be better to deal with this in a certain context than always, because I can see there's a distinction there, or a nuance that's very hard to express. And I think I have a really difficult time expressing a lot of my ideas. So, the tools I use are indicative of my attempt to express them better. Also trying to, curve that, as Stacy said, with the room that you're in, right? With the people that you're in, you have to be. So anyway, I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Got another one. Well, I'm at a wrap point. I've got to go. But thank you for this, and I do believe we're getting closer and closer to the black hole at the middle of this. And I think one of these days we're going to get sucked into it, and everybody's going to look at each other and go, "Oh, that's what it is." I do believe that's coming.
Well, that's a nice movie. We could build a few of those. I don't know if we can make a final one, but we could definitely have some trajectory. Get prepared to make some of those. That's my intention. That's my intention. Grow a few sprouts in the direction of understanding, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Bye all. Love all.
I think if we had infinite time, I would be less pokey. My sense is we don't have infinite time. And that's why I have a sense of urgency here. Anyway, I'm going to go play with my puppies and my daughter. Have a good weekend, the rest of it.
I hope we find out why the moderator can't see the raised hand on the participant screen.
Yeah, who is moderator two?
Me.
Oh.
But Doug had the official moderator, and he couldn't see the icons, so that's a problem.
Huh. Okay.
I didn't see any hands this time either, so I apologize for talking.
And when he makes you moderator, they disappear.
Okay.
Oh,
all right, Alex.
Thanks.
Talk to you later.